Hello, and welcome to my solo gallery show in New York City. I'm Liv Tyler, and this is Reflections. I've been painting my entire life, but 5 years ago in 2020, when we all were in our homes and could not go anywhere, I couldn't really find inspiration from outside sources, so I went internal and started exploring my emotional landscape and my psyche and kind of how to interpret those emotions. I was also going through therapy at the time and didn't really know how to communicate my emotions and how to tell people that story. So I went to colors, and every color has an emotion, every color has a memory, and I synthesized those colors into paintings that told my story. This is Finding My Way. This is the cover image of the show, and it is the painting I think really encapsulates the message of this show. I can't really talk about Finding My Way without talking about The Wonder of Wander, but Finding My Way is about knowing where I'm headed and having confidence in my journey and in myself and feeling like I'm being guided by these other forces. There's a solitary figure in this kind of almost a cocoon. Someone pointed out to me too that it almost looks like shoulders, like the silhouette of a body. But again, I can't really tell you all about it without talking about The Wonder of Wander. The Wonder of Wander is what I consider the first painting of this series. I painted this 5 years ago. At that point, I didn't really know where I was headed. I had confidence in the journey and faith that I would end up where I wanted to be, but I had no idea what that was. So there's a bunch of figures kind of lost and wandering, and it's called The Wonder of Wander because I wanted to enjoy that process of wandering and not knowing where I was headed. And that was 5 years ago. This is really the first painting that I made that felt right. I had done an abstract series before, but this was really the one that did all of this. So then Finding My Way, created last year, a few months ago, it's basically in the same universe. This is the flip side of this. I finished painting this and I had a print of this literally right up on the wall next to it, and I was like, that's it. And this is their first time being together, is exhibiting in this show. And they're soul pieces, and they're a story that is intertwined. It's a progression of this. Even some of the colors kind of lead into each other, and I see this literally being the flip side, or maybe this is above it, because these colors are so similar, and none of that was intentional. So much of this is a subconscious process and an intuitive process. Sometimes I go into a painting knowing what I'm gonna make, and other times I go into a painting no idea what I'm feeling, and the painting is almost an oracle and reflects back to me, and I interpret what it's trying to tell me. So going from there, this bottom row of paintings is all part of this original series. I no longer have all of them, so the story is kind of out of order, but I'll just start here. This is Identity. Identity is a piece about me and who I am. It unintentionally kind of has the colors of the pan flag, which I think is kind of funny. Someone pointed that out to me and I was like, oh, that makes sense. It's about my queer and non-binary identity and kind of growing into that and kind of accepting it and loving it, and also realizing it's not the most important thing of who I am. But this piece is a celebration of it, and this is kind of representation of the core of who I am that does not change regardless of my identity. And then everything else is this fluidity of sexuality and gender identity and all of the feelings intertwined with that and all of the emotions. And this was just my way to express me and who I am with everything going on. I find it's really important to kind of explore that, and I was really thinking about that with this piece. Yeah, that's Identity. And then going down, this is Forest. I love this piece because of the gravity of this piece. It flips and changes, and the gravity doesn't really feel like it's in one direction. It feels like it's almost upside down, which I love. Forest is inspired by the magical sense you have as a kid of a forest. At least I did and still do, of this magic that the forest has. It's opportunities for magic and the whimsy of a forest, especially with my imagination as a kid. So these to me are the colors of a magical forest. So I conveyed this painting, and the kind of the warped gravity sense is almost the magic and the fairy holes and all of that could happen in a forest. And it's just a childish imagination of all of that. Okay, so then we have Dew, which I can't really talk about without two other paintings that aren't here. Dew comes after Storm and Tranquility, which are these paintings of an intensity and a storm and crashing waves and floods. And this is kind of the calm after that. Dew is when you wake up in the morning after a rainstorm, and like the grass has little dewdrops and are glinting, and there's still a little bit of water on your window, and that's kind of what this painting's conveying. It's a very soft painting. It doesn't have a ton of brightness. It's very muted and washed out, and that's exactly what I wanted to convey with this piece. This is fantasy. Fantasy kind of goes hand in hand with forest, but fantasy is about the like passionate imagination I had as a kid. It's princesses and unicorns and make-believe and all of that, and dress up and all of that like magic as a kid. And I think these colors so perfectly convey it with like almost this glitter effect in the blues and the pinks and the purples. This is just like my imagination land and like my safe space as a child, and I wanted to kind of have that energy in this. A lot of this was like healing my inner child and exploring that energy. So this painting was really important to me to make, and I think it captures that like childlike energy perfectly. The next painting is quite a jump from this. This is called Nightmare. Nightmare comes right before Storm, which I apologize for talking so much about a painting that's not here, but that painting is like the pinnacle and like the main point of this series. So many of these paintings are intertwined with it. Nightmare, I woke up one day from a nightmare, felt like I was still living this nightmare. So I immediately went to the canvas, it was like 9 in the morning, and did this. You'll notice most of my paintings don't have black in them. The only 2 paintings that have black in them are this one and The Wonder of Wonder. I don't really typically use black. I don't use black in my pieces anymore. Before, I kind of like, at this point I hadn't really fully developed my language for creation yet. Black is like the absence of all color, but it's actually like the presence of every color. And so if I ever want to convey darkness or like black, I'll do that with other colors. I'll just get the darkest point I can from other colors. But I think it's really important in this piece because Nightmare is about this intensity and this pain and this darkness that I didn't know what to do with. I needed a way to convey that pain, and it was through this. This piece is like the heaviest piece in my collection of work and kind of my least favorite piece now because it's so intense, but it's also a great piece because it's so intense. Jumping over a piece just for a second. This is Brain Fuzz. It actually goes hand in hand with Nightmare. It's about dissociation. As someone with PTSD, I have this, like I suffer from dissociation, which is basically when you like don't feel real. Most simply, when you're like not connected to reality, it can be through your body, through your mind. And this was how I wanted to convey it. It's like this softness and this mutedness of like everything around you, like this kind of flipped gravity. So it's a bunch of muted colors, this white kind of going over everything, and then multiple directions to kind of convey that sense of like discomfort and confusion. And then the final piece is Pathways. Pathways is the final piece in the first core collection that I painted. Pathways was a kind of the antithesis or like the build off of The Wonder of Wonder. It's about, I made this right after I'd applied to art schools and I was getting into art schools. And it was about this hope I felt and all of these paths before me, and I didn't know which one to choose or where I was going to end up, but I had hope and I had direction and knew where I was headed. And then 4 years later, it led to this piece. This is Creek. Creek is inspired by the nature I live close to. It's about like all of the little light sources and pockets of water within a forest and kind of all the little interwoven and intertwined natural bodies of water and natural entities you can find in a forest, with this like light kind of coming in and trickling down into this water source. It's just the peace and the loveliness of nature. Then we have Galactic. Galactic is just a fun and energetic piece that is again about childhood, but it's a little bit later, kind of like a little bit older, and just the love I had with my friends and the imagination and just kind of that childlike energy with these really bright colors that kind of explode off the canvas, and these like almost little spirits that happen that feel like little kids running around. And it's an explosion of happiness and like maturity, but still enjoying that like childlike energy. Next we have Sunset. Sunset is a lovely, vibrant piece that is about the gloriousness of mornings. When you wake up in the morning and there's golden light streaming through your window and everything is fresh again. You have a new start, you have a new beginning, and there's endless opportunities for what today could hold. That's kind of the energy that I wanted to convey in this piece. Sunset's kind of the opposite. It's the end of the day. It's almost the inverse of that piece. I painted this in the studio one day when the sun was setting and like these exact colors were in the sky, and the studio was painted in a golden light, and I was listening to the Dune soundtrack. I just wanted to convey the richness and warmth of the end of a day. I think a lot of times like sunsets are set as something sad or like this ending, but I think having this reassurance that there is going to be beauty at the end of every day, no matter what has happened that day, is something that's really important to me and something I wanted to convey in this piece. And I see sunsets as new beginnings. It's the closing of a chapter and then the opportunity for something new. And then something I thought was interesting was someone pointed out in this piece that they see a phoenix here, which I really love. So much of this process is like, I get to paint these pieces, but then they transform through everyone else's eyes, which is why I call this reflections. It's about how once I create these pieces, they're a piece of me, but they're also a piece of you, and they tell you something different, and it completely changes the way these pieces exist, which I love. Next we have Meadows, which is a pretty recent piece. It's about the comfort of a meadow, like this soft environment and this, I don't know, these like billowing hills with soft grass, and like I could just see myself like sleeping right there. And it's just safety and tranquility and comfort. This is Blooming. I created this for my 21st birthday a few months ago, and it was just about the hope I feel in my life right now, and feeling like I'm really growing into who I've always wanted to be, and feeling like I'm on the exact path I want to be. It's just this brightness and this passion and this energy and this love and this opportunity for new growth. This is aquariums. When I made this piece, I didn't really know what was gonna happen, but then when I finished it, I was like, it kind of looks like an aquarium. Like, you know, like when like you have this blue tank of water and then there's like all the coral and all those colors coming through. So again, it's just an exploratory piece of color and emotion of like childhood and loving going to the aquarium, and like all those colors. Like, I feel like often we're told like synthetic and bright colors don't exist in nature, but like they do, especially in coral and especially in like water life and water, like natural reefs and all of that. And I think that's like where I find a lot of color inspiration. So I think that's just a fun piece, although it doesn't have like a huge emotional tie. It's a very fun piece just for the fact that it like explores those colors. This is called Murky. It's kind of like, you know, like ponds where they have like the green like radioactive film on the top of it. That's kind of like the inspiration for this piece and where I kind of sourced the title from it. I don't know, like in this painting I just kind of see that pond and like the sun setting and it kind of being in this golden like almost synthetic light, and that green just really glowing. And it's kind of just about like the things you have to fight through to get to the good underneath. Ooh, okay, this is one of my favorite stories in here. This is called Connection. This piece is about my Twitch community. So shout out to y'all. I made this piece as a tribute and love for the community I've built online. I've been streaming for almost 5 years now and have met incredible people. And this painting is like my way of capturing that energy and capturing that community. I painted this live with them, and it has little pockets of like all the people in my community and all their colors and like what I attribute to them. But overall, it's just about like this strong community and bond I've found with people around the world because of this platform, which I find really special. And I just love that I get to like make a piece that tributes them. Next we have Rivers, which connects to Creek in the way that it's inspired by the same landscape. Rivers is just about bodies of water. I'm so inspired by like the philosophy of water and just the movement of water, and how water is never the same. It can exist in the same spot, but that water has moved. Whatever you were present in has like doesn't exist anymore. It's constantly cycling and constantly changing. And I find that really special, and I think it's like a metaphor for life and how things are constantly changing, and you're never in the same spot, even if it feels like you are, because things are constantly shifting and constantly changing. Next we have Emergence. Well, I made this piece right after the 2024 election, and a lot of it was about the fight for hope and the fight for passion and the fight for good throughout everything, and kind of just this want to like emerge into this light and this hope that we'll find it again. And just this passion and this energy and a bit of despair, but a lot of hope to fight through it all. And then the final piece up on this wall is Galaxy, which is just a lovely piece about the galaxy and about the magnitude of space and all of the endless possibilities and all of the endless stories and love and feelings. Like, I feel like all of these paintings kind of exist within their own universe and their own galaxy, and I think that's kind of the amalgamation of all of it. So these three paintings are kind of a triptych. They kind of bleed into each other, obviously by color scheme, but also by story. The first piece, this is Growth. It's about just growth and transformation and this energy of new beginnings. I love the color green for that reason. I feel like it just conveys new beginnings and new opportunities and new growth and the opportunity for things to grow from anything, from destruction, from whatever is there, something will grow back. And then Drowning is a really special piece. I started off completely differently. You can kind of see hints of it. There are some reds and some yellows. When I was first making it, I had a completely different vision and it just didn't work. And I was so frustrated and didn't know what to do. And I just started taking blues to it once it dried. And so I called this piece Drowning because it's kind of drowning out what was below it. But you still see these little pockets of color come through, which I think makes it so special. And I think there's a lot of metaphors within that too, of kind of like covering up things and kind of how they're still lurking underneath. I mean, it's an energy, it's a trauma, it's like something that is underneath that like you have to face at some point, but it's also okay to build new things on top of it and to let it become a different story. Then this piece is called Sanctuary. It's a piece about a safe space and having this light and this comfort within. It has like this pocket of light and then this darkness. I got some questions about this at the show. None of this is black, it's all purple. And it's just this creates these pockets of darkness and then kind of converges in the center, this pocket of light. It's about having a safe space within yourself and having this sanctuary to come back to and this energy and a light within you. This is Nebula. It's pretty straightforward. It's just about the energy of a nebula and kind of capturing those colors in that space within a galaxy. This is Kingdoms. This is a really special piece. A lot of my paintings are like this conversation with what I see as a higher power and kind of this intuitive message and just like listening and tapping into the universe and what it's trying to tell me. I journal and meditate when I create most of my pieces, and this piece was just such a fluid conversation. Like, it was just like, I felt like I was flowing, and it was like one of the most clear messages I'd received in a while. Kingdom is about my dreams and my visions for my future and receiving this message that it's gonna happen, and kingdoms take a while to build. They take like a while to build and you don't see things pay off for a while, but if you have confidence within yourself and confidence within your path and your power, it's possible. And this is like my vision for my future and what I'm building and what I'm pouring into, because I know what I'm building will come to fruition, and then receiving like that assurance from something outside of me was really special. And yeah, I really love this piece. This is Multicolor Mind. This was actually created in a painting studio last year. The prompt was just to create a representation of your psyche. So I wanted to kind of have all these pockets of color and meaning. To me, every emotion has a color and every person has a color. So my brain is just like an amalgamation of color. When I think about a person, it's a color. When I feel something, I see a color. And so much of my mind is just color. So when I think about things, when I process things, I come to a canvas. So this piece is kind of like all the multi-layered of my psyche and all of the things that are stored in there. So it's friends and memories and like tasks I have to handle and like all of these things that come together to form my present mind state. I don't think it's like entirely a representation of who I am, because my mind is not who I am. It's whatever's happening up here, you know? And so this is kind of just like a snapshot of like what I was thinking and what I was feeling in that moment and all of the things that were existing. You know, holding space for these dark pockets and these pockets of struggle with like these pockets of light and this pocket of community and like all of these different messages within. And then this piece is called Coral. I created this right after coming back from a trip to Turks and Caicos, actually. Anytime I go without painting for a little bit, I think like that trip I'd gone without painting for like a week, I feel like there's just like an explosion right after. And this piece is so clearly like a tribute to that trip. It was like the first thing I painted, but like the beaches, and again, the like underwater, the colors underwater, the sea creatures, like all of that energy, the conch shells, that's like exactly this, like these colors. And I didn't go into it with that intention of creating, but as soon as it was coming out of me, I was like, oh, this is that. This is this trip I took. This is this people. This is this energy. It was such like a positive environment, such amazing people. Like the locals were just incredible, and this positive, relaxed energy that I honestly really wanted to carry with me. I mean, as you can probably tell, I'm an incredibly hard worker and really bad at taking breaks. So this was kind of also my visual reminder of breaks can be productive and abundant and worthwhile. And I just love like all of the little pockets of messages within this piece. And every time I look at it, it immediately takes me back to that trip. And then this final piece I think is really special because it kind of perfectly wraps up everything that I make. It's called Bleeding Heart, and it's about the intense empathy I feel and the intense emotions I feel and the intense love I feel, and how everything comes right into me and then it becomes all of this. And I think it's like the perfect representation of how all of this happens and how all of my paintings happen. It's having such an open heart and an open soul, and feeling everything so deeply allows me to make all of these pieces. And having worked really hard on building up boundaries, my bleeding heart no longer hurts, if that makes sense. I no longer allow people to like take advantage of it or hold space for things that aren't healthy, but I let myself feel and have immense empathy without letting it hurt anymore, if that makes sense. And yeah, it's just this really intense motion and energy within it. I actually started painting it upside down, and I was painting it as the sun was setting, and I thought it was gonna be just like a simple sunset piece, like, ooh, I like the colors. And then like I looked at it and I was like, oh no, that's me. Like that's like this perfect metaphor for like emotions and opening your heart. And I thought it was just like the perfect way to kind of lead you into the show or to close out the show, depending on where you begin and where you emerge. They all feed into each other. They all are reflections of me, but then get to become reflections of you and the interpretations you have. Thank you so much for coming to my gallery show. I hope you enjoyed.